The tray that broke a man. The metal food slot slams open. A tray slides inside. It's not a meal, at least not one meant for humans. On that tray sits a cold, greasy loaf. A lump of beans, flour, and mystery meat baked into a brick. No seasoning. No care. Just a punishment. At ADX Florence, prisoners whisper that this food isn't meant to feed you. It's meant to break you. In Pelican Bay, men in solitary scrape at trays with their bare hands because spoons were taken away. And at Rikers Island, fights explode when a guard slides the wrong tray to the wrong inmate. Across America's most notorious prisons, food isn't just fuel. It's a weapon, a tool to control, to humiliate, and to remind inmates that they're not free. But how did prison meals turn into a weapon of control? And what happens when men, treated like animals, finally snap? Milk powder, vegetables, and seasonings, blended, baked, and served as a solid block. Prison officials claimed it contained every nutrient needed for survival. But the truth? It was never meant to be eaten. The loaf was designed as a punishment, a way to strip food of its last shred of dignity. Guards served it to men who disobeyed rules, who fought, who talked back, sometimes simply for irritating the wrong officer. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, day after day, the same tasteless brick. Some prisoners gagged on the first bite. Others forced it down until nausea twisted their stomachs. Many pushed it aside, choosing hunger over humiliation. One inmate described in a letter, "The loaf isn't punishment for your stomach. It's punishment for your soul. It tells you that you're less than human, that you're an animal." Across the country, lawsuits challenged the loaf as cruel and unusual punishment. A few states banned it. But in prisons like ADX Florence, it remained quiet, unseen, a hidden weapon behind concrete walls. The loaf wasn't about feeding men. It was about breaking them. And it was only the beginning. The tray wars at Rikers. At Rikers Island, food is never just a meal. It's currency. Inmates trade soup packs for protection, cookies for favors, milk carton for silence. In a world where money has no value, food is power. That power makes every trade dangerous. In one notorious incident, a guard deliberately slid a smaller portion of chicken into the wrong cell. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was deliberate. Either way, the message was clear. One man had more, one had less. Within minutes, insults were flying. Shouts echoed across the tier. Then came fists. Then came blades. Bones sharpened into weapons, metal carved from bed frames. Blood sprayed across the floors. Guards hesitated to step in. Some inmates claimed they laughed before moving. By the end, the fight left bodies broken and the cell block soaked in violence. All of it sparked by one tray. For people outside, it would be unthinkable. For inmates inside Rikers, it was just another day. Because when survival depends on a meal, food is never food. It is respect. It is dignity. It is survival. And when those things are taken away, men will kill for them. Pelican Bay, meals in the dark. The security housing unit at Pelican Bay, known simply as the SHU, is one of the most isolated places in America. No windows, no sunlight, no voices, just gray walls, steel doors, and silence. In solitary, the only human interaction most men get is a tray sliding through a slot. Sometimes hot, sometimes cold, sometimes spoiled. One prisoner described the agony of waiting. He heard the food cart roll down the tier, the clatter of trays, the echo of footsteps. His heart pounded as it drew closer. Then silence. The cart rolled past his door. No tray, no explanation, no food. For a man trapped in a box, missing one meal feels like missing everything. Others recalled spoiled rice, sour beans, meat crawling with bugs. Complaints went nowhere. Guards shrugged, or worse, smirked. Some men scraped dried beans off trays with their fingers. Others had scraps, molding them into strange shapes, small tokens of control in a place where they had none. But desperation never stays quiet. And in the SHU, every spoiled tray pushed men closer to the edge. Hunger in solitary isn't just physical, it's psychological. And at Pelican Bay, it was designed that way. ADX, the Hunger Strike. In 2013, the men of ADX Florence, the most secure prison in America, launched a desperate protest. They refused their trays. Not just one or two, but dozens of men locked in concrete cells joined in. It was a hunger strike, a way to fight back against endless isolation, dehumanizing punishment, and the crushing monotony of the loaf. At first, the guards ignored them. Then came the response, more Nutraloaf. 3 times a day, the same tasteless brick. Some inmates collapsed in weakness. Others smuggled out letters, desperate to be heard. We are being fed like animals. This is not food. This is punishment. The hunger strike lasted weeks. But outside, few paid attention. It barely made the news. Inside, the message was clear. Hunger itself could be turned into a weapon. The strike ended in silence, crushed not by force, but by indifference. And the loaf remained, fed like animals. Across these prisons, the story is the same. At Rikers, food sparks riots. At Pelican Bay, trays are punishment. At ADX Florence, the loaf becomes torture. Food is no longer food. It is humiliation. It is currency. It is a leash. And for the men locked inside, every tray is a reminder of their place. Not men, not citizens, not even humans. Animals, fed to survive, but never to live. The cold cart at Rikers. The morning food cart rattles down the tier. The smell of oatmeal drifts through the air, but by the time trays reach the last cells, the food is cold. The eggs are rubbery. The milk is warm. One inmate shouts, "This is trash. You feed dogs better than this." His voice echoes through the block. He hurls his tray back through the slot. It explodes against the wall, oatmeal dripping down in slow streams. The guards don't bring replacements. Instead, they punish the entire block. Trays are withheld for hours. By noon, the sound of fists hammering against steel doors echoes up and down the hallway. Inmates chant in unison. Their voice is hoarse with hunger. The air feels charged, electric with rage. A single cold breakfast, something so small in the outside world, becomes a spark for chaos at Rikers. And the guards know it. That's the point. The spoiled milk in Pelican Bay. In solitary confinement, the tray is more than food, it's a lifeline. One prisoner in Pelican Bay lifted his milk carton and smelled something foul. Sour. Rotten. The carton was weeks past expiration. He gagged. It wasn't the first time. Meals often arrived spoiled. Bread with mold, fruit spotted brown, beans that reeked. At first, he filed complaints. Each one was ignored. The trays kept coming. He felt mocked, humiliated. Finally, in a moment of rage, he hurled the carton back through the slot. The milk burst across a guard's boots. The response was swift. He lost commissary rights. Weeks without noodles, without coffee, without the small comforts that kept him sane. In solitary, food is the only thing connecting you to humanity. When it becomes spoiled, when it becomes punishment, you don't just lose a meal, you lose the last fragile thread of dignity holding you together. The riot over chicken. At Rikers, there's one day inmates look forward to, Chicken Day. The smell fills the block, cutting through the usual stench of sweat and bleach. For a brief moment, it feels like something close to normal, but in prison, nothing is normal. In one incident, a guard slid a tray with an extra piece of chicken into a cell. Whether it was a mistake or deliberate, no one knows. Another inmate noticed. Insults flew. The block tensed. Within seconds, fists slammed against steel. Then knives, sharpened from bones, carved from metal scraps, were drawn. The block descended into chaos. Chicken bones became weapons. Guards rushed in swinging batons. Blood splattered across the same trays that once held food. What started as a simple meal ended with a cell block dripping in violence. All because of one extra piece of chicken. At Rikers, food doesn't just feed men. It fuels war. ADX, the loaf is torture. At ADX Florence, Nutraloaf isn't a meal. It's a sentence. Inmates describe being placed on loaf diets for days, even weeks at a time. No variety, no seasoning. Just the same brick, morning, noon, and night. One man lasted 5 days before breaking down. He sobbed into his tray, begging guards for real food. Another refused to eat entirely, losing weight rapidly until medical staff intervened. But that's the design. The loaf doesn't just strip flavor, it strips dignity. It tells you that you don't deserve the smallest comfort, that you are not worth a meal cooked like a human being. Even judges reviewing lawsuits admitted, this is not about nutrition, this is about punishment. Inside ADX, punishment isn't shouted. It's served quietly on a tray. Fed like animals, the deepening cycle. The pattern repeats across America's darkest prisons. At Rikers, food sparks riots. At Pelican Bay, spoiled trays humiliate men into silence. At ADX Florence, the loaf breaks minds one bite at a time. Food is no longer about survival. It is no longer about feeding. It is a leash. It is a weapon. It is control. And when men are stripped of even this most basic dignity, when eating becomes punishment, the line between human and animal blurs. And that is exactly the point. When hunger turns deadly, hunger doesn't just gnaw at the stomach. It twists the mind. At Rikers, one man refused trays for 3 days straight. Whether it was protest, pride, or pure despair, no one knows. On the 4th day, weak and delirious, he attacked another inmate, not for money, not for revenge, but for a bag of chips. Witnesses said the fight looked different from the usual battles over respect or gang beef. This one was animalistic, clawing, biting, desperate. It ended in blood, with guards dragging both men away. The official report called it a gang altercation. But the men inside whispered the truth. It was about hunger. When food is stripped of dignity, survival becomes savage. And sometimes it becomes deadly. When hunger turns deadly, hunger doesn't just gnaw at the stomach. It twists the mind. At Rikers, one man refused trays for 3 days straight. Whether it was protest, pride, or pure despair, no one knows. On the 4th day, weak and delirious, he attacked another inmate, not for money, not for revenge, but for a bag of chips. Witnesses said the fight looked different from the usual battles over respect or gang beef. This one was animalistic, clawing, biting, desperate. It ended in blood, with guards dragging both men away. The official report called it a gang altercation. But the men inside whispered the truth. It was about hunger. When food is stripped of dignity, survival becomes savage. And sometimes it becomes deadly. The Commissary King. Not every inmate was crushed by the system. Some found ways to bend it. At Rikers, one man built an empire from the commissary. He stockpiled noodles, coffee, honey buns. He traded them for favors, for protection, for silence. Other inmates called him the Commissary King. Guards whispered his name. For a time, he controlled the flow of food on the tier. But power in prison never lasts. One night, his stash was raided. By morning, his shelves were empty, his power gone. Without food, he was just another inmate. Food had built his empire. Food had destroyed it. The boiling point. Dinner was late at Rikers. Hours late. At first, inmates shouted through doors. Then they banged fists against steel. Then, when the trays finally arrived, some men refused to eat. Others hurled food at guards. Fires were set. The block exploded. It wasn't just about hunger. It was about control. When food is late, when trays are spoiled, when dignity is stripped away, rage builds like pressure in a boiler. And when it bursts, the result is chaos. The guards eventually regained control. But the men inside remembered the lesson. Food is never neutral. It can spark silence. It can spark violence. And it can spark rebellion. Fed like animals. The truth behind the walls. By now, the pattern is clear. At Rikers, food sparks riots. At Pelican Bay, spoiled trays humiliate men into silence. At ADX Florence, the loaf grinds spirits into dust. Food is no longer nourishment. It's humiliation. Food is no longer comfort. It's leverage. Food is no longer human. It's a leash. And yet, even in the face of this control, men resist. They riot, they trade, they strike. Because when you strip away freedom, the fight for food is the fight for dignity. Every tray that slides through the slot becomes more than a meal. It becomes a battlefield. The peanut butter crackdown. Peanut butter. On the outside, it's just a snack. Inside Rikers, it's treasure. For years, jars of peanut butter were traded like gold. They could buy protection, favors, even silence from enemies. Some men use it to patch holes in walls, others to hide contraband. But the real scandal came when guards discovered blades hidden inside empty jars. The crackdown was immediate. No more jars. Only tiny, single-use packets. To outsiders, it sounded trivial. To the men inside, it was a shockwave. Whole economies collapsed. Power shifted. Fights erupted over packets too small to feed a child. The guards framed it as security. But for inmates, it was another reminder. Even the smallest luxury can be taken away in an instant. And when that luxury is food, survival becomes desperation. Pelican Bay, the moldy bread. One inmate opened his sandwich and froze. The bread was spotted green, crawling with mold. He stared at it, gagged, and pushed it back. The next day, the same thing. And the day after, complaints went nowhere. Guards said nothing. The trays kept coming. Word spread through the SHU vents. The mold was an accident. It was punishment. Another way to break spirits in silence. Some men refused to eat entirely. Others, too weak to resist, swallowed the moldy bread anyway. One wrote later, "Every bite felt like swallowing filth, but it was either that or starve. In solitary, the food is already stripped of dignity. When it turns rotten, it becomes more than humiliation. It becomes proof that you are forgotten. The soup debt. In the outside world, a packet of ramen costs cents. In Rikers, it can cost a man his life. One inmate borrowed soup packs from another. He couldn't pay them back. At first, it was threats, then shoves. Finally, in the recreation yard, it turned into a full assault. Men said the fight was brutal. Fists, shanks, guards dragging bodies across the yard, all for noodles. The official report said gang violence, but the prisoners who saw it knew the truth. Hunger drives debts, and debts drive death. ADX, the Starvation Cell. Whispers circulate through ADX about starvation cells. Inmates claim certain men are placed in units where trays arrive hours late, or don't arrive at all. Portions are cut smaller. Meals vanish. One letter smuggled out read, "They don't want us dead. They want us weak. They want us crawling for a crust of bread." The Bureau of Prisons denies it, but the stories keep spreading. Men describe weight dropping fast, strength fading, minds unraveling. Whether true or not, the fear itself is a weapon, because in a place like ADX, even the rumor of starvation is enough to keep men in line. Food doesn't just feed bodies here. It breaks them. The rotten fruit riot. Dinner trays at Rikers arrived late one night, stacked with spoiled fruit, apples with brown spots, oranges soft and leaking juice. For men who had been waiting all day, it was a final insult. One inmate shouted, "You call this food?" and hurled his orange back through the slot. It burst against the wall, juice splatter in the hallway. Others joined in. Apples flew through the bars like missiles. Guards ducked, then charged in swinging batons. Inmates fought back, not just with fists and shanks, but with food itself. Rotten fruit smeared the walls. Blood dripped onto the same trays that had sparked the chaos. By the end, dozens were injured. The official report blamed gangs. But the truth whispered through the block was simpler. The riot was born out of spoiled fruit. Because when food is used to humiliate, humiliation eventually burns into rage. Pelican Bay, the hunger strike of 2011. It began in silence. A few men pushed their trays back untouched. Then dozens. Then hundreds. Within days, thousands of inmates across California joined a hunger strike, with Pelican Bay at the center. They were protesting indefinite solitary confinement, rotten food, and dehumanizing treatment. For weeks, trays piled up uneaten outside cells. Men grew pale, their eyes sunken, their bodies frail. Some collapsed. Medical teams rushed in, checking pulses, offering vitamins. But the men refused. Outside, families marched. The media finally paid attention. Lawmakers were forced to respond. For the first time in years, the silence inside Pelican Bay roared into the world outside. The hunger strike lasted 3 weeks. Some demands were met, others ignored. But one truth could not be silenced. Even starving, men found power in refusing the very thing meant to control them. Food had become a protest. Hunger had become a weapon. The kitchen worker's secret. In prison kitchens, food is power, and power corrupts. At Rikers, kitchen workers, prisoners themselves, decide who gets a bigger portion, who gets scraps, who gets favors. Guards often look the other way. With that control comes danger. In one case, a kitchen worker slipped shards of glass into another inmate's meal. The plot was caught at the last second, but the message spread like wildfire. Even the food on your tray could be a death sentence. Some prisoners began refusing trays entirely, relying only on commissary. Others picked apart every meal, suspicious of tampering. Trust was gone, and in a place where food is survival, distrust is another form of slow death. The last tray, at ADX Florence, a prisoner on suicide watch received his final tray. The loaf, a cup of water. Nothing more. He pushed it aside. Hours passed. Guards checked on him. The tray remained untouched. By morning, he was gone. His last contact with the world wasn't family. It wasn't freedom. It wasn't even words. It was food, cold, tasteless, and stripped of all dignity. His story spread quietly through the blocks, a haunting reminder that in America's harshest prisons, food is not life. It is punishment. It is control. And sometimes it is the last straw